My boyfriend dumped me because I'm a shameful woman's daughter. He doesn't know my real mother is his mother's boss. Ryan and I dated for 2 years. Met at a coffee shop near the university. He was finishing law school, I was in my final year of business. Everything was perfect until he met my family. Or what he thought was my family. See, I was raised by my dad and stepmother Donna after my parents divorced when I was 3. She married Dad when I was 5. Loved me like her own. She works as a bartender at a gentleman's club because the tips are incredible, and she's putting my stepbrother through medical school. But I don't lead with that information. My bio mom, Victoria, is CEO of Hartley Industries, a pharmaceutical company with 8,000 employees. We reconnected when I turned 18. She pays for my college, my apartment, everything. But I wanted Ryan to love me for me, not for my mother's money, so I never mentioned her. I only introduced him to Dad and Donna. The dinner was going fine until Ryan asked what Donna did for work. She said honestly, I work in hospitality. Ryan pushed. What kind? Dad answered, she works at a club downtown. Makes great money. Ryan kept pushing until Donna finally said, I'm a bartender at the Velvet Room. I saw Ryan's face change. The Velvet Room is upscale, but it's still a strip club. He barely spoke the rest of dinner. In the car afterward, he was cold. You didn't tell me your stepmother works at a strip club. Why would I? It's just a job. Just a job? Cassie, that's not just a job. What kind of woman does that? A woman supporting her family? He dropped me off without kissing me goodnight. 2 days later, he called. We need to talk. We met at the same coffee shop where we'd met. He didn't even let me sit down before starting. I can't do this. I can't be with someone from that kind of background. What kind of background? You know what kind. My mother raised me with standards. She works respectable jobs, built a real career, director of operations at Hartley Industries. That's the kind of family I need to be with. Not whatever your situation is. You're breaking up with me because my stepmother tends bar? I'm breaking up with you because you're clearly from a different class of people. What would my colleagues think? My family? That I'm dating some girl whose mother figure dances for money? She doesn't dance. She serves drinks. Same environment, same kind of woman. And that stuff, it's genetic. The apple doesn't fall far from the tree. I sat there stunned. You think I'm contaminated because of where Donna works? I think we come from different worlds. My mother worked her way up from nothing to become a director at a Fortune 500 company. She taught me to aim higher. You're beautiful, Cassie, but beauty fades. Class is forever. And you don't have it. He left me sitting there, blocked my number that night, posted on social media about knowing your worth and not settling. His friends liked it. His mother, Beverly, commented with heart emojis. That's when I decided to destroy them both. See, what Ryan didn't know was that Beverly's boss, the CEO she's been trying to impress for 15 years, is my biological mother. Victoria and I have lunch every Wednesday. She's been grooming me to take over eventually. I have an office at Hartley Industries under a different last name for privacy. I know every executive, every department head, and I know exactly how precarious Beverly's position is. She's been gunning for a VP promotion for 3 years, always passed over. Victoria once told me Beverly was competent but lacks strategic thinking. Her reviews are mediocre. She's one restructure away from being redundant. I called Victoria that night, told her everything, not asking for favors, just sharing what happened. Victoria was quiet for a long moment. Beverly's son said you're trash? Because of Donna? He said I'm from a different class, that his mother taught him standards. Victoria laughed. His mother who spends her lunch breaks crying in the bathroom because she can't figure out Excel? Who did I keep after the merger out of pity? That Beverly? The next week, Victoria announced a major restructuring. Every director had to reapply for their position, present their value to the company. Beverly was panic texting Ryan constantly. I know because his friend Jake was still friendly with me and showed me screenshots. They're making us compete for our own jobs. The CEO is personally reviewing everything. The presentations were scheduled for Friday. Thursday night, Victoria called me. Want to sit in on tomorrow's reviews? Good learning experience. You can use the executive observation room. I said yes and drove to the office that night. The building was mostly empty when I got there around 8. Security nodded at me because I had a badge with my real last name on it and they knew who I was. And I took the elevator to the executive floor and found the observation room next to the main boardroom. A tech guy was already there setting things up. He showed me how the one-way glass worked. I could see into the boardroom perfectly, but anyone in there just saw a mirror. He adjusted the audio system and suddenly I could hear everything. He tested it by walking into the boardroom and talking. His voice came through the speakers clear and sharp. He came back and explained the controls. Volume, recording options, even a panic button if something went wrong during observations. I sat in one of the leather chairs facing the glass and looked into the empty boardroom. Tomorrow, Beverly would stand there trying to save her job. Tomorrow, I would watch her struggle. The thought made something twist in my chest, but I pushed it away. My phone rang around 9. Victoria. I answered, and she asked if I was still at the office. I told her I was in the observation room. She was quiet for a second. Then she asked if I was sure I wanted to do this. Her voice sounded careful, like she was worried about me. I said I needed to see it through. I needed to watch what happened. She sighed and said she understood, but she wanted me to know something. Once I watched someone's career fall apart, I couldn't unsee it. Once I saw Beverly at her worst, that image would stay with me. Was I ready for that? I told her I was. She said okay, and that she would see me tomorrow. After we hung up, I sat in the observation room for another hour, just staring at the empty boardroom. Then I went home. I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, thinking about tomorrow. Part of me felt excited. Ryan had called me trash. Beverly had raised him to think people like Donna were beneath him. Now Beverly would pay for that. But another part of me felt sick. What if this was too much? What if I was being cruel instead of fair? Around 3 in the morning, I grabbed my phone and texted Jake. I asked how Beverly was doing. He answered right away like he couldn't sleep either. He said Ryan's mom had been crying for days. She was terrified. Ryan was terrified too. Their whole family was scared about what would happen. I stared at that message for a long time. Then I put my phone down and tried to sleep, but I couldn't. Friday morning finally came. I got up early and showered. I put on the professional clothes I kept at my office. A black suit that made me look older. Heels that added 2 inches. I did my makeup carefully. Looked at myself in the mirror. I looked like an executive. Like someone who belonged in that observation room. Like Victoria's daughter. I got to the office at 7:30. The presentations didn't start until 9, but I wanted to be there early. I went straight to the observation room and sat down. Watched through the glass as people started arriving. Executives filed in carrying coffee and laptops. Board members took their seats at the big table. Victoria came in last, looking calm and professional. She didn't look at the observation room glass, but I knew she knew I was there. The first presentation started at 9. Some director I didn't know talking about operational efficiency. I barely paid attention. The second presentation was better. A woman who actually seemed to know what she was doing. Then it was Beverly's turn. I watched her walk into the boardroom at 10:15. She looked exhausted. Her suit was nice, but her face was pale and tight. She carried a huge binder that looked like she had spent weeks putting it together. I could see her hands shaking as she set up her laptop. She dropped the connection cord twice before getting it plugged in. Something uncomfortable twisted in my stomach watching her struggle. The laptop wouldn't connect to the projector at first. Beverly's face went red as she fumbled with the cables. One of the executives checked his watch. Another whispered something to the person next to him. Victoria sat perfectly still with a neutral expression on her face. Finally, the screen came on. Beverly took a breath and started talking. She talked about her 15 years at the company, all the projects she had worked on. But when she gave examples, they sounded thin. Small achievements stretched to sound bigger than they were. When she got to the strategic vision section, I could tell she had copied it from corporate websites. Words like synergy and optimization and stakeholder engagement, buzzwords that didn't mean anything specific. The board members started asking questions. Hard questions about specific metrics and outcomes. Beverly stumbled through her answers. She kept saying things like we optimized the workflow and we created synergy between departments. But when they asked for numbers, she didn't have them. When they asked for specific examples, she got vague. One executive asked what her biggest achievement was, and Beverly talked for 3 minutes without actually answering the question. I was getting what I wanted. Beverly was failing. But watching her struggle felt different from I thought it would. It didn't feel like justice. It felt like watching someone drown while everyone else just watched. After 45 minutes, Beverly finished. She thanked everyone and her voice sounded desperate, like she knew how badly it had gone. She gathered her things too fast and left the boardroom walking like she was trying not to run. Through the glass, I watched her stop in the hallway outside. She leaned against the wall and put her hand over her mouth. I realized I was watching someone's whole professional life crumble. 15 years of work ending in one bad presentation. I got up and left the observation room, went to my office and closed the door. Sat at my desk feeling sick instead of happy. My phone buzzed. Text from Jake. He said Ryan just called him crying. Beverly came home and couldn't stop shaking. She thought she was going to lose everything. I stared at that text. The revenge I had planned felt different now. Less like justice. More like cruelty. Someone knocked on my door an hour later. Victoria came in and sat down across from me. She looked at my face with that careful attention she always had, like she could see everything I was feeling. She asked if I got what I wanted from watching. I opened my mouth to answer, but nothing came out. What I wanted and what I felt now were completely different things. I didn't know what to say. Victoria waited for my answer, and I finally managed to get words out, telling her I thought I wanted justice, but watching Beverly fall apart just made me feel sick. She nodded slowly and said that power is complicated, especially when you use it for personal reasons instead of professional ones. Using corporate authority to hurt someone who hurt you always costs something, she explained. And now I had to decide if that cost was worth what I got. I asked her what she meant by cost, and she said that knowing you have the power to destroy people changes how you see yourself. And once you use that power, you can't pretend you're just a regular person who got hurt. You become someone who weaponizes their advantages, and that's a different kind of person entirely. She stood up and told me to go home and think about what kind of person I wanted to be, then left my office quietly. I sat there for another 20 minutes feeling worse than I had all day. Finally, I grabbed my keys and drove to Dad and Donna's house without calling first, needing to be around people who loved me without all the corporate complications. Donna opened the door and took one look at my face before pulling me into a hug. I started crying without fully understanding why, just letting it all out while she held me and rubbed my back. Dad appeared in the hallway looking worried, and Donna waved him over and they both just held me while I cried on their front porch. Eventually, Donna guided me inside and sat me down at the kitchen table while Dad made tea. They didn't ask questions, just let me cry until I was ready to talk. Over dinner, I told them what happened, leaving out some details but explaining that I used my connection to Victoria to hurt the people who hurt me. I described watching Beverly's presentation fail and how it felt different from what I expected. Dad looked troubled and asked if I thought I'd done the right thing. I said I didn't know anymore. Donna surprised me by saying that sometimes people need to face consequences for their cruelty. She didn't think I should feel guilty for letting Beverly's mediocrity catch up with her, especially after what Ryan said about me. Dad argued that revenge and justice aren't the same thing, but Donna pointed out that Beverly raised a son who thinks bartenders are shameful and their families are contaminated. She said people like that need to learn that their prejudices have costs. My phone rang while we were still talking, and Donna saw it was Emerson calling. She put him on speaker, and his excited voice filled the kitchen. He told us about a surgery he observed that day, and how the attending physician praised his work and said he had real talent. He was talking so fast about the procedure and what he learned, his enthusiasm spilling through the phone. Listening to his excitement about the career Donna's bartending job was making possible reminded me exactly why Ryan's contempt for her was so unforgivable. Donna worked at the Velvet Room so Emerson could become a surgeon, and Ryan had called her shameful for it. After Emerson hung up, I hugged Donna again and thanked her for always being there for me. She said that's what family does, and she was proud of the woman I was becoming even when I made mistakes. I drove home that night thinking about the difference between consequences and revenge, wondering if there was actually a line between them, or if I was just trying to make myself feel better. My phone showed 3 missed calls from Jake and several texts asking if I was okay. That meant Ryan probably told him I was somehow involved in his mother's situation. I didn't respond to the texts, not ready to deal with Jake's questions yet. Saturday morning, I woke up to knocking on my apartment door. Jake stood there with 2 coffee cups and a careful expression on his face. No, he said Ryan figured out that I must know someone at Hartley Industries because the timing was too convenient. I let him in without confirming or denying anything, and we sat down on my couch. Jake looked at me with something like disappointment and said he thought I was better than this. His words stung more than I expected because Jake had always been kind to me. Having him question my character made me question it too. I asked him if Ryan ever questioned his own character when he called me trash because of Donna's job. Jake admitted that Ryan was cruel and what he said was wrong, but he insisted that 2 wrongs don't make things right. We talked for an hour about class and prejudice and revenge. Jake told me that Beverly grew up in extreme poverty and spent her whole life terrified of falling back into it. That fear was what made her obsessed with respectability and status, and she passed that anxiety to Ryan as values. Now I was using their fear against them, he said, and that made me just as bad as they were. I argued that they hurt me first, but Jake said hurting people back just creates more hurt. He told me about Beverly's childhood, how she grew up in a trailer park with an alcoholic father and worked 3 jobs to put herself through community college. She clawed her way up from nothing and taught Ryan that status and respectability were the only things protecting them from falling back down. It didn't excuse what Ryan said to me, Jake acknowledged, but it explained why Beverly was so harsh about class and why Ryan absorbed those values. After Jake left, I sat with this new information, understanding Beverly's cruelty toward people she sees as lower class differently now. It didn't excuse what Ryan said to me or the values Beverly taught him, but it made them human in a way that complicated my anger. Beverly wasn't just some snob looking down on people. She was someone so scared of poverty that she built her entire identity around never being poor again, and she taught Ryan that same fear disguised as standards. Sunday morning, Victoria called to tell me that the board met yesterday afternoon to discuss the presentations. Beverly's was ranked in the bottom 3 out of 8 directors who presented. Victoria said she would make her final decision this week, but she wanted me to know that whatever happened would be based on Beverly's actual performance, not on my anger at Ryan. She asked me again what I wanted the outcome to be, and I realized I didn't have a good answer anymore. I called Victoria that evening after sitting with Jake's words for hours. She answered on the second ring, and I told her everything about Jake's visit, about Beverly growing up in a trailer park with an alcoholic father, about the fear that drove her obsession with status. Victoria was quiet for a long time after I finished talking. When she finally spoke, her voice was thoughtful instead of angry. She said that most cruelty comes from fear, that people who feel secure don't need to push others down to feel safe. Then she asked me what I wanted the outcome to be now that I understood Beverly better. I opened my mouth to answer and realized I had no idea anymore. The clear anger that drove me to set this whole thing in motion had gotten complicated by understanding, and I didn't know what justice looked like when I could see everyone's humanity. Victoria told me to think about it and we'd talk more soon. Monday morning, I sat in my business ethics class trying to focus on the lecture, but my mind kept circling back to the same question. What did justice actually look like in this situation? My professor was talking about corporate responsibility and conflicts of interest, about how leaders have to balance competing obligations and make decisions that serve multiple stakeholders. I felt like the universe was directly mocking me. Every example she gave seemed designed to highlight exactly the mess I'd created by mixing personal revenge with corporate power. The student next to me was taking detailed notes while I just stared at my blank laptop screen, unable to concentrate on anything except the weight of the choice I'd set in motion. My phone buzzed during class with a text from Jake. Ryan wanted to talk to me. My first reaction was to refuse, to tell Jake that Ryan had his chance to talk and he used it to call me trash. But something made me hesitate before typing that response. Maybe it was Victoria's question about what I wanted the outcome to be, or maybe it was just curiosity about what Ryan thought he could possibly say now. I texted back that I'd meet him, but not at our usual coffee shop. I picked a place across town, somewhere without memories attached to it. Jake sent back the address confirmation and said Ryan would be there at 3. I got to the coffee shop 15 minutes early and picked a table in the back corner where we wouldn't be easily seen. Ryan walked in exactly at 3 and I barely recognized him. He looked terrible, exhausted in a way I'd never seen during our 2 years together. His suit was wrinkled like he'd slept in it, and there were dark circles under his eyes. He bought a coffee and sat down across from me without the confident posture he usually carried. His hands shook slightly as he set his cup on the table. Ryan started talking before I could say anything. He said he knew I was connected to what was happening to his mother somehow, that the timing was too convenient to be coincidence. He wasn't here to beg, but he needed me to understand what this would do to his family. His father had serious health issues and relied on his mother's insurance. His younger sister was in high school and counting on his mother's income to pay for college. If Beverly lost her job, their whole life would fall apart. Not just her career, but everything they'd built. All the security his mother had fought so hard to create. He looked at me with desperate eyes and I could see he was barely holding himself together. I sat there listening to him talk about his family's money situation, and his mother's fear and his own guilt for not understanding what she'd given up to get where she was. Part of me wanted to scream at him that he should have thought about consequences before he called me shameful, before he decided I was contaminated by Donna's job. But another part of me recognized that he was learning something painful right now. He was facing the reality that his judgments had real costs, that looking down on people could circle back and hurt the people he loved. Maybe that was the point all along, not destroying Beverly but making Ryan see what his prejudice actually meant. I asked Ryan if he understood why what he said to me was so cruel. He was quiet for a long time, staring at his coffee cup and not meeting my eyes. Finally, he admitted that he never thought about Donna as a real person, with her own dignity and reasons for her choices. He saw her job and made assumptions about her character, about who she was as a human being. And he did the same thing to me, judged me based on association instead of knowing me. He said he was ashamed of that now, that watching his mother face judgment from people who didn't know her full story made him realize what he'd done to me and Donna. We talked for 2 hours, and Ryan cried at one point, actually cried sitting in that coffee shop. I watched him face his own prejudices and realized that this was more satisfying than watching his mother's career fall apart. This was what I actually wanted, for him to understand what he'd done and feel the weight of it. He asked if there was anything I could do to help his mother, and I told him honestly that I didn't know if there was, or if I should. The question wasn't whether I had power to change things, but whether using that power would make me the same kind of person who judged others without seeing their full humanity. That evening, I met Victoria for lunch. Our regular Wednesday meeting moved to Monday because of everything happening. We sat at her usual table in the executive dining room, and I told her about my conversation with Ryan. She listened carefully without interrupting, her face showing that CEO expression of taking in information and processing it. When I finished, she asked me what I thought Beverly's fate should be. She reminded me that as future CEO, I'd face these kinds of decisions constantly, choices where there were no perfect answers, and I had to develop my own way of thinking about what was fair. The ethics weren't in a textbook. They were in figuring out how to balance justice with mercy when real people's lives were on the line. I told Victoria that I thought Beverly should face real consequences for being mediocre at her job for 15 years, for coasting on competence instead of excellence. But I didn't want to be the reason she was completely destroyed. There was a difference between accountability and revenge, and I needed to stay on the right side of that line even if Ryan hadn't. Victoria nodded slowly and said that was a mature distinction to make. She'd been thinking about options that would hold Beverly accountable without devastating her family, ways to address the performance issues without using corporate power as a personal weapon. Victoria explained that there was a position opening in their satellite office in another state, a lateral move that would keep Beverly's salary and benefits but remove her from the promotion track she'd been failing to advance on anyway. It would be a clear signal that headquarters didn't see her as executive material, a demotion in terms of status and prestige, but it wouldn't be a firing and it would get her away from the corporate politics she was terrible at handling. The satellite office needed someone competent to manage operations, and Beverly could do that job, just not the strategic leadership role she'd been pushing for. It was a solution that served the company's needs while also acknowledging that Beverly had a family depending on her income. I looked at Victoria across the table and asked the question that had been sitting in my stomach since she explained the satellite office plan. Was this really about Beverly's performance, or was she doing it for me? Victoria set down her fork and met my eyes with that CEO expression she gets when she's being completely honest. Both, she said. Beverly didn't deserve to keep competing for VP positions she would never get. Her performance reviews proved that over 15 years, but she wasn't incompetent enough to fire outright either. The satellite office solution served the company's needs while also being more kind than I probably deserved to give after what Ryan said to me. She reminded me that leadership meant making decisions that served multiple purposes at once, and this one held Beverly responsible without destroying her family. I nodded and finished my lunch, feeling something settle in my chest that had been twisted up since the breakup. Wednesday afternoon came, and I was in my office when Victoria's assistant sent the company-wide email announcing the restructuring decisions. I opened it on my laptop and read through the list of changes. 2 directors were let go completely, their positions eliminated. 3 others got promoted to new roles with bigger budgets and teams. And Beverly was offered the satellite office position in another state. Same salary and benefits, but clearly moved aside from headquarters. The email was professional and didn't explain the reasoning behind each decision, but everyone who worked at Hartley Industries would understand what it meant. Beverly was being put out to pasture, removed from the competition she'd been losing for years. My phone buzzed within minutes. Jake's text came through with a screenshot of a message from Ryan. His mom was crying but also relieved, the text said. She'd been so scared of getting fired completely that keeping her job felt like winning, even though everyone knew it was really a demotion. Ryan's family would be okay money-wise even though they had to move to a new state and start over somewhere else. Jake added his own message below the screenshot saying that Ryan knew somehow this was mercy from me, that I could have pushed for worse and didn't, and he was trying to understand why I showed kindness to people who'd been cruel to me. I stared at my phone for a long time before putting it down without responding. The next few days passed in a weird blur where I went to classes and studied for finals, but kept thinking about what had happened. I had the power to destroy Beverly completely, and I chose not to use it. Ryan hurt me badly when he called me shameful and said I didn't have class, and Beverly taught him the values that made him think that way about people like Donna, but completely ruining them wouldn't have made me feel better for more than a moment. The satisfaction I thought I'd get from revenge turned out to be hollow, compared to the feeling of choosing mercy instead. I realized that having the ability to hurt someone doesn't mean you should do it, and that lesson felt more valuable than watching Beverly's career fall apart would have been. Thursday night my phone rang and Donna's name showed up on the screen. I answered and she said she'd heard through Dad that things worked out with the situation I'd been dealing with, and she wanted me to know she was proud of me. I asked what she meant because I hadn't told her many details about the whole Beverly situation. Donna laughed and said that Dad told her enough for her to understand I'd had a choice between revenge and fairness, and I picked the harder option. Revenge is easy, she said. Any hurt person can lash out and cause pain back. But fairness takes real strength because you have to think about what's right, instead of just what feels good in the moment. Her words made my throat tight and I had to blink back tears while thanking her. That weekend I drove to Dad and Donna's house needing to be around family who loved me without complications. We sat in their kitchen drinking coffee and talking about everything that happened, and the conversation turned to class and dignity, and what it means to be a good person when you have power over others. Donna told me stories about her own life that I'd never heard before. Growing up poor in a trailer park and facing judgment from teachers and neighbors who thought she'd never amount to anything. She talked about choosing to work at the Velvet Room even though people looked down on it, because the money was good and her family needed it, and how she learned that her worth as a person wasn't defined by other people's narrow ideas about respectability. Dad held her hand while she talked, and I saw the love between them that had nothing to do with status or money. Emerson came home that afternoon and we all had dinner together around their small kitchen table. I looked at the faces of my family and felt grateful in a way I hadn't before Ryan's rejection. These people loved me when I was just me, before I had access to Victoria's money and power, when I was just a kid whose mom left and whose stepmom worked at a strip club. They didn't care about my connections or my future CEO position. They cared about who I was as a person. That was worth more than any revenge I could have taken on Ryan and Beverly. The dinner was loud and full of laughter. Emerson telling stories about his medical school rotations, and Dad making terrible jokes that made Donna roll her eyes. I realized that Ryan's cruelty had actually given me a gift, by forcing me to see what really mattered. Monday morning, I was walking across campus to my business law class when I saw Ryan coming toward me from the other direction. We both stopped and froze for a second, and I thought about turning around and going a different way. But he walked toward me carefully like he was approaching something that might run away. And when he got close, he said his family was moving in 2 weeks, and he wanted to thank me before he left. He said he was sorry for everything he said to me, and sorry for the person he was when he said those things. His eyes were red like he hadn't been sleeping well, and his usual confidence was gone completely. I stood there holding my backpack straps and didn't know what to say at first. I told Ryan that I hoped he learned to see people for who they are instead of judging them by their jobs or where they come from. He nodded and said he was already learning that lesson the hard way. Watching his mom face judgment from people at Hartley Industries who didn't know her full story made him understand what he'd done to me and Donna. We stood there on the campus walkway with students passing around us, and I realized this was closure, the real kind that comes from both people understanding what happened. We didn't hug or promise to stay friends or exchange new phone numbers, but there was something finished between us that felt more valuable than the revenge I'd wanted when he first broke up with me. Later that week, Victoria took me to lunch at our usual Wednesday spot and told me something interesting about Beverly. Apparently, the satellite office position was actually a relief for her in ways Victoria hadn't expected. Beverly had been exhausted from competing for promotions she never got, always trying to prove herself and always falling short. The satellite office meant she could stop fighting that losing battle and just do her job without the constant pressure of headquarters politics. Sometimes what looks like punishment is actually release from a situation that was making someone miserable, Victoria said. And that's something I needed to understand about leadership. People aren't always happiest climbing higher. Sometimes they're happiest finding a place where they can succeed at what they're actually good at. I thought about that for the rest of the day. The next Wednesday at our regular lunch spot, I asked Victoria if she thought I did the right thing with Beverly and Ryan. She set down her fork and looked at me carefully before answering that there's no single right thing in situations like this. I made choices that balance justice with mercy, accountability with compassion, and that's all anyone can do when they have power over other people's lives. She said the important thing was that I thought about the consequences and didn't just act from anger, and that showed I was learning what leadership actually means. My final semester continued, and I focused on my classes and my future, feeling like I'd learned more from this whole situation than from any business course I'd taken. My ethics professor assigned a paper on conflicts of interest in corporate decision-making, and I wrote about the importance of separating personal problems from professional choices. I talked about how having power means being extra careful about why you use it, and making sure your decisions serve something bigger than just your own feelings. When she handed back the papers 3 weeks later, mine had an A at the top, and a note saying it was clear I'd thought deeply about these issues from real experience. I kept that paper in my desk drawer at home, a reminder of what I'd learned about myself. Jake and I met for coffee in late April at a place near campus, and he told me that Ryan was doing okay in his new city. He'd started working at a small law firm that did a lot of pro bono work for people who couldn't afford lawyers, and Jake said Ryan was trying to be more aware of his own biases about class and status. Jake told me he was proud of how I handled everything, that I could have destroyed Ryan's family completely, but I chose not to. He said he was glad we stayed friends through all of this because he valued people who knew how to be fair, even when they were hurt. A few days later, Donna texted me a photo from the Velvet Room showing her and 5 other bartenders holding champagne glasses and smiling at the camera. The caption said, "Still shameful after all these years," with a bunch of laughing emojis. I laughed out loud in my apartment and sent back a heart emoji, grateful for her ability to find humor in everything and never let other people's judgment touch her sense of self-worth. The photo made me think about how Donna had more dignity in her pinky finger than Ryan and Beverly had in their whole bodies, and I was lucky to have grown up learning from her. Victoria started bringing me to more executive meetings as my graduation got closer, introducing me to board members and key investors as her daughter, and the person who would eventually take over the company. People were curious about me and asked questions about my education and my vision for the pharmaceutical industry, and I learned to navigate those conversations with more skill than I'd had when this all started. I watched how Victoria handled difficult personalities and competing interests, how she stayed calm when people disagreed with her, and how she built support for her ideas by listening to other people's concerns first. One of the board members, an older woman named Caitlin Henderson, who'd been with the company for 20 years, pulled me aside after a meeting in early May. She said she'd heard about how I handled the Beverly situation from Victoria, and she wanted me to know something important. She told me that knowing when to show mercy is rarer than knowing when to show strength, and I was going to be a good CEO someday, because I understood that difference. I thanked her and said I was still learning, and she smiled and said the best leaders never stop learning from their mistakes and their choices. I graduated in May with honors, and my whole family was there in the audience. Victoria and Dad and Donna and Emerson all sitting together and cheering when I walked across the stage to get my diploma. Looking at them sitting there together, I realized that having 2 families from completely different worlds made me richer than Ryan's narrow focus on status and respectability ever could have. They clapped so loud I could hear them over everyone else, and when I looked at their faces, I saw genuine pride and love that had nothing to do with my future CEO position or Victoria's money. That evening, we all went to dinner at a nice restaurant downtown, and Victoria gave a toast about family and second chances and the importance of staying true to yourself no matter what other people think of your circumstances. Dad added that he was proud of the woman I'd become, someone who knew how to be strong and kind at the same time. Donna said she always knew I was going to do great things, and she was just happy she got to be part of my journey, even if some people thought she wasn't good enough to raise someone like me. Emerson told everyone about his upcoming residency at a hospital in the city, a position he'd worked incredibly hard to earn. He thanked Donna for making his medical career possible through her work at the Velvet Room, saying he knew she'd sacrificed her own pride sometimes to give him opportunities. I watched Victoria's face while Emerson talked, and I saw genuine respect there for Donna's choices and her strength. Whatever judgment Victoria might have had about Donna's job had been replaced by recognition of her sacrifice and the love that motivated everything she did. I started working full-time at Hartley Industries in June, officially joining the executive development program that would prepare me to eventually take over as CEO. My office was bigger now, and my name was on the door with my real last name, Victoria's surname that I'd kept private for so long. No more hiding who I was or pretending to be someone simpler to make other people comfortable. The first week I sat in my office looking at my name on the door and the view of the city from my window, thinking about everything that had happened since Ryan broke up with me 8 months ago. The company felt different now that I worked there officially instead of hiding in a fake office with a fake name. July came fast, and I settled into the routine of executive meetings and department reviews and learning how Victoria ran everything. One morning, I opened my email and saw Beverly's name in my inbox, and my stomach tightened. The subject line said, "Thank you," and I stared at it for 5 minutes before clicking. She wrote that the satellite office was good for her family, even though the move had been hard at first. She thanked me for whatever role I played in her keeping her job. She said she was sorry for the values she taught her son, and she understood now that dignity comes from how you treat people, not what job title you have. I read it 3 times and felt something shift in my chest. Not forgiveness exactly, but something close to it. I wrote back carefully, keeping my response short. I acknowledged her apology and wished her family well in their new city. After I sent it, I sat looking at the sent message and realized this email exchange was probably the closest we would ever get to real resolution. Some hurts can't be fully healed, but they can be acknowledged and set aside, and that felt like enough. Victoria and I had lunch in August at the same restaurant where we always met on Wednesdays. She ordered her usual salad and I got pasta, and she looked at me across the table with that CEO expression she got when she was about to say something important. She told me she'd been thinking about succession planning more seriously, and she wanted to start moving some responsibilities to me over the next few years. I would be the youngest CEO in Hartley Industries history when the time came, but she was sure I was ready for it. I felt excited and scared at the same time, thinking about running a company with 8,000 employees. The rest of the summer I spent learning the pharmaceutical business from the inside, not just sitting in meetings, but actually understanding how everything worked. I visited manufacturing facilities in 3 different states and met with department heads and walked through labs where researchers developed new medicines. One scientist showed me a drug they were testing that could help people with a rare disease, and I understood for the first time that this company actually changed people's lives. It was big and scary and exciting all at once, knowing I would eventually lead all of this. Dad and Donna visited my apartment in September, and we ordered pizza and sat on my couch talking about how much had changed in the year since Ryan broke up with me. Dad said that sometimes the worst things that happen to us lead to the best outcomes, and I had to agree that losing Ryan led me to find myself. Donna looked around my apartment with its nice furniture and big windows and said she was proud of how I'd grown into my life instead of letting it overwhelm me. We talked about Ryan and Beverly and the whole situation, and Dad said he hoped I'd learned that revenge feels good in the moment, but mercy feels better long-term. Donna mentioned she was thinking about stopping work at the Velvet Room in a few years now that Emerson was finishing medical school. I immediately offered to help her money-wise, but she refused, shaking her head firmly. She said she was proud of the work she did and the life she built, and she didn't need rescue, just respect. I assured her I'd always respected her, and that Ryan's cruelty taught me to value what people do for their families over what society thinks of their jobs. She hugged me and said that was all she ever wanted me to learn. We started talking about maybe starting a scholarship fund for children of service workers, using my resources to honor people like her who society looks down on. The idea grew as we talked, and by the time they left that night, I was already planning how to make it happen. Victoria loved the scholarship idea when I brought it up at our next lunch. She offered to have Hartley Industries match whatever I contributed, and by October, we'd established a fund that would help dozens of students whose parents worked in jobs society thinks are shameful. It felt like turning my pain into something that actually helped people, which was better than revenge ever was. We set up the application process and hired someone to manage it, and I felt proud every time I thought about kids getting college money because their parents worked hard in jobs like Donna's. Jake texted me in November that Ryan was dating someone new, a public defender who worked with poor clients who couldn't afford fancy lawyers. He said Ryan seemed really different now, like he'd learned something important about judging people. I was happy for him in a distant way, glad that the lesson he learned wasn't just about being scared of consequences, but about actual growth as a person. I ran into Ryan one more time over Thanksgiving when he was visiting Jake, and we happened to be at the same coffee shop. We had a brief conversation that was friendly but not close, standing by the counter with our drinks. He told me about his work at the new law firm and his girlfriend who inspired him to do more pro bono cases. He asked about his mother's move to the satellite office, and I told him about my role at Hartley Industries and the scholarship fund Donna and I created together. He looks down at his coffee cup and back up at me. I'm glad you didn't destroy us when you could have. I understand now that mercy is actually strength, not weakness. I watch him carefully, seeing someone different from the guy who dumped me in this same coffee shop a year ago. I hope you teach your kids different values than your mom taught you. He nods slowly. I will. I promise I will. We finish our drinks and say goodbye, and I walk to my car feeling like something heavy finally lifted off my chest. December comes fast, and I spend most of it working at Hartley Industries and finishing up projects before the new year. The office gets decorated with lights and garland, but I'm too busy learning new systems and meeting with department heads to pay much attention. Every night I drive home thinking about everything that happened since Ryan broke up with me. The coffee shop breakup where he called me trash. Victoria's restructuring announcement. Watching Beverly struggle through her presentation. The choice I made to show mercy instead of destroying them completely. And Jake's visit when he told me about Beverly's poverty background. All those moments that forced me to figure out who I wanted to be when I had power over people who hurt me. I learned that having the ability to hurt people back doesn't mean you should do it. Justice turned out to be way more complicated than simple punishment. Some nights I think about what would have happened if I'd pushed Victoria to fire Beverly completely, and I'm glad I didn't, because that version of me seems mean and small now. Victoria and I have our regular Wednesday lunch in the last week of December at the same restaurant we always go to. She orders her usual salad, and I get pasta, and we talk about the company's fourth quarter numbers for a while. Then she puts down her fork and looks at me seriously. I'm proud of the leader you're becoming. Someone who understands both strength and compassion. I feel my throat get tight because her approval means everything to me. Thank you for guiding me through this year. For being the mother I needed. She reaches across the table and squeezes my hand. Watching you grow has been the greatest joy of reconnecting with you. We finish lunch talking about plans for next year and new projects I'll be taking on. And when we leave, I hug her tight in the parking lot before getting in my car. New Year's Eve arrives and most people leave the office early, but I stay late working on a presentation. Around 8 o'clock, I turn off my computer and just sit there looking out my window at the city lights starting to glow in the darkness. People are probably getting ready for parties and countdowns and champagne toasts. I have a family that loves me no matter what. Dad and Donna, who raised me with actual values about treating people with respect. Victoria, who came back into my life and taught me how to use power responsibly. Emerson, who's going to be an amazing doctor because Donna worked her ass off at a job people looked down on. Even Jake, who stayed my friend when it would have been easier to pick Ryan's side. I have a career at Hartley Industries that challenges me every single day and will eventually put me in charge of 8,000 employees. Ryan's rejection was supposed to make me feel small and shameful and less than. Instead, it forced me to recognize my own power and figure out how to use it without becoming the kind of person who destroys others for revenge. I'm grateful for that lesson, even though learning it hurt like hell. My phone buzzes with a text from Donna asking if I'm coming to their New Year's party, and I text back that I'll be there in an hour. I grab my coat and turn off my office lights and head toward the elevator, thinking about the year ahead and all the things I still want to build and learn and become.